Hi, this is Chris, the Guitar Amp Tech from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for joining me today. What? Oh, yeah, all gone. If you want to find out why, check that link. But today, we've got a really exciting amp to look at. It's a, I'm going to guess, early 70s Superbass. We'll find out more as we go inside it. Superbass, which is a sister amp to the Superlead, very little difference between them. And it sounds fantastic. We just got to make this one sound fantastic. If you're interested, go grab a coffee, pull up a chair, look over my shoulder, and let's get stuck in. In 1967, the JTM 45 evolved into the Superlead and Superbass plexis. By the end of 67, the amp had changed its model number from JTM to JMP. You probably know, but I'll tell you anyway. The JTM stands for Jim and Terry Marshall. Terry was Jim's son. JMP is the abbreviation for Jim Marshall Products. We can see here the very traditional early Marshall layout. Presence, bass, middle, treble, volume 1, volume 2 with the 4 inputs. Quite often you would see a jumper lead going between the 2 different channels there. Beautiful condition. A bit of that gold piping has disappeared here, but all in all, amazing condition. Let's flip it around and see what the back looks like. Not quite so tidy at the back. We've got our high tension and mains fuse here. The mains plug was changed from that rather unique connection to the more standard IEC type of plug. The voltage selection is looking like a bit of a mess. I'm going to see what that looks like underneath. And also this is the impedance selection. Also going to find out what's happening under there. There are speaker outs. So, yeah, the owner had said something about that. So he says, looking at the amp from the rear, the left output had a label saying line in. I had the last tech return it to a normal speaker cab out. I'm only using one 16 ohm cab at the moment, and I plug it into the right side. Please check that the outputs are wired correctly. Will do. My cab is a 1960 AV, 280 watt, set at 16 ohm. Cool. All right, let's open her up and see what we find. Here's the bottom view. Signs of definite usage over the last 50 years. I think I will glue that back down so it doesn't catch on anything and damage it up the sides, because it looks beautiful up the sides, but signs of road wear underneath, so we'll tidy that up while we're here. This is what we like to see. I love the way Marshall do this. So a label here of who did the assembly and the date it was tested, which is 14th of the 10th, 1970. Wow, that makes it 52 years old. Jeez. Okay, we've got 4 groove tubes here. They've all copped a whack of heat. Okay, I was hoping to find some of the original old tubes there, but looks like they're long gone. These you expect to go, but quite often we see some nice little gems here. Now we've got the original LCR capacitors here, I think. Does it say LCR anywhere? Oh yeah. Original LCR capacitors, which makes them 50 years old. This one obviously has been changed more recently. That looks more like an F&T. Can't really see the label. Can you see it there? It looks like an F&T anyway. That's been changed. So, I know, normally when you change one, you're thinking to yourself, the others can't be too far behind. I will check the ESR on them, equivalent series resistance, and then get back to the owner and see if he wants to do that. Okay, let's have a look at the inside. You can see work's been done here, and that looks really shoddy. And here. Okay, 0.68. All right, I can see what they've done. The early Superleads were like this, where they had a shared cathode going to 820 with a 320 microfarad bypass cap. Huge size. So this is going to let every frequency, pretty much down to DC, go through. At some later stage, I'm thinking maybe 69, somewhere around there. They did what's called a split cathode, where instead of joining them together, they've got two individual paths. We've got that 820, 250. So once again, this stage is very low. This is the Superlead. And the other cathode is going through 2.7 with a 0.68. Now this is more typical of what more modern Marshalls would do. And it basically chokes out a lot of the low frequency, and what gives Marshall, instead of having a flabbiness from overdriving low frequencies, cut those out and you get a much sharper, more well-defined low, mid and high end. So someone has already done this in the this super bass. Just shocking workmanship there. These are two plate resistors and 100K metal film. Yeah, great resistors. Look wrong. And what the hell do you call that? Jesus. Then at the next preamp stage, they've paralleled, by the looks of it, these two caps. What's that? That's a 0.2, and this one is a 0.47. Okay, so they're trying to get another 0.68. And then the other thing we've noticed here is, what's this masking tape about? What's all this about? Man, I've got no idea who's been in here before. What's that? That's meant to be 100K. It's either overheated and discoloured, or someone's put in the wrong value, because that to me looks like, it could even be 100 ohm. Now I've got to measure that. Otherwise, it looks pretty original. The owner wants it brighter, more like a Superlead, so that's our mission. Then we've got a couple of other things to sort out once we've got some power onto it, but we've got a good starting point now. First thing I want to do is check the fuses. HT fuse, 1 amp, correct. Mains fuse in the USA is 4 amp, 2 amp here, which is correct. Now, next thing I want to do is to make sure they've wired up the mains wiring correctly. Very often it's not. So where are we? Where's our mains lead? Here we go. Brown is active. Active goes to the fuse, which is correct. Fuse, yellow wire, should go to the power switch. Yes, it does. Correct. And the blue is going to the voltage selector, and from there to the transformer. Okay, I'm happy with that. I know the amp is safe. Let's just have a quick look at the earths. Look, I'm not a mad fan of the screwed down earth points, and Marshall has so many of them, all of which are just asking to be a problem. But that first earth point from here, is going to a riveted connection there at the base of the EL34. Yeah, I would like to see a earth point soldered here and then bring in those earths back to one good solid earth point. Put in a nice solid connection to the chassis so I don't have to worry about any oxidation under washers and nuts and bolts, so that's always going to be a good connection. I've got that, so the main earth coming in off the power point is coming in there. I've got also picked up the earth from that filter cap there, and that filter cap there I've already soldered onto the main chassis. I've just got this masking tape there to hold it in place so I'm not chasing it around. And got a nice big 120 watt soldering iron which will heat up anything. And there we go. And now we're going to have a safer earth connection and also better connection for noise. I'll give that a bit of a clean up later. So that's my new wire going up there. Hopefully that looks stock. I think that looks pretty stock. Had a bit of a glitch since we last spoke. My overhead camera decided to part companies with the world, and it took with it some of the overhead shots that I've been taking. The owner of this Superbass wants to convert it to a Superlead, which is fairly straightforward. There's not too many changes. They are very similar. A lot of the change happens in this very first V1 stage. So this is the Superbass, and we'll see here that it's got the two cathodes are joined together with a 320 microfarad capacitor. Huge capacitor that's going to take us down to virtually DC, very, very low frequencies. Here's the Superlead, Mark II Superlead. So you can see what they've done is they've split the cathodes, given each triode its own cathode treatment. Here's the more traditional one, very similar to the voicing of the Superbass. You can see here the cathode bypass resistor is 820 ohms and the cathode bypass capacitor is 250 microfarads. That is huge. It's still going to have very low frequency, very low, way lower than what a guitar is going to get down to. Probably makes the amp a bit woofy, if all truth be told. Seeing we're modifying it, I'm very tempted to modify this. Now the other side of it is the bright channel, and here it's a 2.7K with a 0.68 microfarad. Now this is going to make it very bright, and once again I'll show you on that same program why this is very bright, but I am going to leave that because Marshall know that when you start increasing the gain you don't want bottom end because it's just going to add to mush and woof. So let's have a look at this program. So here's this program. It's at a site called Amp Books, and as you may know, the lowest frequency on a guitar is 82, 83 hertz. That's your low E string, and all of the harmonics of that are all going to be higher. So the lowest fundamental we got on the guitar is 83 hertz. So that's a very important figure. 10 kilohertz will never reach on a guitar. So here we have frequency, and as you'll notice it's a logarithmic scale, not a linear scale. So we've got 10 hertz, 100 hertz, 1 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz. And these lines are all 10th graticule. So that's 100 hertz, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, blah, blah. And you'll see they all compact as they go to the next decile, because our ears hear in logarithmic manner, not in a linear manner. which is why decibels are such an important unit of measure. And so this is frequency going up, and this is the volume at a certain frequency. So if we look at it with that bright channel, let's do that calculation. Bam, look at that. So very high, it gives us nice high gain at high frequencies, but I'd say we normally look at about 3 dB down, right? So I would say roughly there, that's going to be 9, 8, 7, at around about 600 Hertz. It's going to start dropping us off. And by 80 Hertz, we're down a long way. And you can see here, it gives you a little calculation. 10 kilohertz, that's pretty linear. At 10 kilohertz, it's 39 dB. And at the low E string, it's 14 dB. So it is a long way down. So we're losing a lot of bottom end. But that's what Marshall want to do to reduce the fluff and the woolliness. So let's now change this to, so we've selected a 12X7 here. So we're now going to change this to the normal channel, which is 250 microfarad, 250 microfarad at 820 ohms, which is 0.82 kilo ohm. Let's recalculate that. Bam, look at that. It is pretty much dead linear from 10 Hertz, way lower than a bass guitar, all the way through to 10 kilohertz. That area here is just going to be mush. So, and that's what they've picked for the normal channel. So I'm thinking, seeing we're going to do some mods, let's start changing some of this stuff. I mean, I've got to change that resistor, that capacitor anyway, but let's try a few other values. Let's try 100 microfarad. Yep, not much change. It's rolling off at around about 20 Hertz. Let's have a look at the traditional Fender value of 25 microfarad. And 3 dB down is going to be around about here. Still, we're letting in way too much low frequency, which is why some Fender amps can sound a bit farty flatulent. And I think we need to take a little bit of a leaf out of the Marshall book and reduce that size. Let's try 10 microfarad. Recalculate. Okay. Big increase in gain. We're liking this. And we're going to be looking 3 dB down. I'm thinking this is going to be pretty much spot on for our normal channel. So we're going to be at around about at 80 Hertz. We're going to be down a few dB. Hard to judge the value because we've got no scale up there. But I'm liking that. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go with 10 microfarad on the normal channel, which is going to eliminate a lot of the fluff, and we're going to stick with 0.68 on the bright channel. Fortunately, we've lost some footage, so I'll just recap. I've pulled some stuff out here which looked crap, and we have to split the cathode anyway. So here's cathode for the first triode. It's coming here, and I'm now going to join a 820 ohm resistor from there to ground, and across it is going to be a 10 microfarad, not a 250 microfarad capacitor, bypass capacitor across that 820. And I'm hoping that 10 microfarad capacitor is going to make it a more usable channel with less fluffiness at the low end. This is our high frequency, our bright channel coming in here. Because this was combined over here, there wasn't any room, any provision made for the extra independent cathode. So I've put in a couple of little turrets here, just miniature ones, which I'm going to use as joining points so we can mount our 2.7K and 0.68K. I didn't want to drill any holes in this vintage turret board, so I've just used existing holes and I put those in. It does make it pretty short, length here, but I reckon we'll fit it. I'm just going to run another earth point for that bright channel. Just want to run this under the new components we're putting in here so I can disguise it a little bit. Actually, this is more just for cosmetic reasons. It's going to give us our mounting point for our second cathode. Just tidy that up a bit. That looks pretty good. If this was a Fender amp, I'd be using these nice brown coloured Vichy resistors, but as I would in a vintage Fender, they're metal film, so they're stable, they're quiet, but that's not what Marshall used. Marshall used these carbon film ones, so I'm going to use a carbon film 820 ohm resistor. So we're going to have a look at how they've put the tolerance stripe on other resistors, and they are pointing towards, and not universally, I'm going to stay in keeping with these. So here the tolerance bar is pointing upwards. Over here they're pointing downwards. So we're going to go with these because it's closer. So I'm going to mount the gold bar up this end. Let me just get a bit of tinning on him. Beautiful. Yeah, this is looking a little bit heavy in the solder department down this end, but I don't have much choice because I've got so many wires joining onto this turret. And you just straighten yourself up there. Okay, so I've got here a 10 microfarad Sprague manufactured one. A little bit of an overkill, 10 microfarad at 150 volts, but hey, at least we know we're never going to blow this one up. This end is ground, so our ground is going to go there. And I'm hoping, just mark this so I don't cut them too short, and then I'll be in the poo. No, we'll bend the wires so that the writing is upwards. So the next tech's going to go, what the hell? He's put in the wrong value. Let me put in a 250 ohm capacitor in here. And I reckon this is going to sound way better. And see, we're modifying it anyway. I think I'm allowed to go and divert a little bit from the stock values. Okay, here we go here. Hopefully I can get that into the top of the turret. Yeah, that's very hot. There we go. And hopefully this one is going to be smack on the right leg. Okay, here we go here. Hopefully I can get that into the top of the turret. Yeah, that's very hot. There we go. And hopefully this one is going to be smack on the right length. Double check that we got the negative going to ground. And And I got the length a little bit wrong. Beautiful. That's not too bad. Might just trim that bit off. All right, next cathode. So this is the yellow wire going off our next cathode. So we've got pin 6 is the plate for the second triad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the blue wire, which is here, and we're going to get rid of that crap. 7 is the grid, 8 is the cathode, yellow, and that's him there. So because there was no place to mount this, I put in these two turrets, so we've got really short space here, but I reckon we'll fit it in. We've got to get in this 2.7 cathode resistor. That looks like it'll fit. This is going to be a bit trickier. This is our 0.68. Oh yeah, I reckon that'll fit. Cool. All right, let's get that resistor in first. Actually, I'll get the cathode attached first. Tin this turret. Tin the cathode connection. Right, that's that. Ooh. Very little space there. So I'm just going to do a bit of a loop here. And do a bit of a loop here. And we might have to adjust that. This is a Vichy brand. Quite like them. I use a lot of their resistors. I just, for initially I used them just because I like the brown colour, and it just let me use a metal film resistor in a vintage Fender without it being that ridiculous blue colour that we see here, which just doesn't look right. Even though they're perfectly good functioning resistors, it just doesn't look right in a vintage amp. Okay, I think we're done there. Label pointing up with the value readable. Value readable. You can see it's an Adam Sprague. Next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of these ugly ones. Perfectly good resistors, 100K, they're our plate resistors, but it just looks wrong, doesn't it? Let me get some 100K. I'll use the carbon film ones again. These are the coupling capacitors going to the next stage. They're probably all right, but I made up a little tool to measure leaking coupling caps, but I can only do it with power on. So I just want to do all my power off work for safety reasons, so I don't have to go discharging and potentially getting a zap. So I'll just do all of this stuff first. The other little tool I like to use a lot is my dividers, and they help me get this spacing exactly right. So that's the gap that I've got to bend my wires to. Not quite the same on both, so I'll do this one first. And taking the distance, then I just set my little component in here, put it in the middle of the legs, and just bend them over. And that one's going to be my left one. Now measure the distance for the next plate load. A bit wider. And this just helps me keep the legs looking nice and straight. Just a bit OCD. I don't like untidy leg bends. That's hideous. That's going to be our next job. And that's the right hand side. I might just get my solder sucker in there. I'll try the manual one first. If this doesn't work, I'll power up the powered solder sucker. Oh yeah, that worked beautifully. I like using this one on the things like turrets and big components, and I use the, well, that worked like shit, and I use the powered solder sucker mainly for PCBs because I can extract components really easily without damaging the tracks and the pads. That looks much better, doesn't it? Much better. I've got to clean all that flux up yet. All right, what's happening here? What a mess. Now he's got the grid and the cathode stuck together. Yeah, I don't like to have the grid close to anything, to be perfectly honest. Because that's, anything that's in there that's noisy is going to be amplified many times over by that triode. All right, what do we got here? It looks like, so what V2 has got on the cathode is an 820 or a 1K, it says there as an option, and a 0.68 in parallel for your cathode bypass. We might just run that in that little program and see what sort of frequency that'll give us. When you have a look at the first triode, you'll see it's a pretty conventional layout. We've got a 100K plate load resistor and the cathode resistor bypassed by a 0.68. That's a little bit different because before we had the 0.68 across a 2.7 and the 820 had a 250, which we changed to 10. So we'll run that in our little program and see what that is going to be here as well. But the second triode look a bit unusual. Look at that. It's got no plate load resistor. That's weird. So when you see that, you know that there's got to be a current limiting resistor somewhere, and here it is. It's in the cathode. So this is a clue that we're going to have a cathode follower. So cathode follower is used because it drives a low impedance very well, and you'll often find them feeding a tone stack, which is exactly what we've got here. That's another bit of a Fender design that Marshall were inspired by. So let's rip out this ugly And that just looks hideous, doesn't it? Don't want to hear you didn't have it in stock. I didn't have stuff in stock and I ordered it. You just don't do this to a customer's amp. All right, I don't think this is going to fit in that hole. Here, it's already got two leads already in there. So that one I think will. So I'll do a bend on that one. And this one is going to be more of a wrap. So I want that wrap to finish there. All right, in you go. Beautiful. Oh no, I might have got it right the first time. Woohoo! Doesn't that look a lot better? The other thing I like about these V-shaped caps is they look similar to the original mustards. These are our two bias caps. Notice that die is pointing the wrong way, or the opposite way to normal, which means we're going to have a negative voltage here. And as you can see, the positive of the electrolytics are going to ground. So we've got 8 microfarad here, 8 microfarad here. These, that's them here. Obviously some replacement thing done later. So I'm going to pull those out because they look wrong. I'm going to use slightly larger values. I like larger values on the bias capacitor. We can't use too large a value because when the amp's been off, these will be discharged and we'll have 0 volts on this side of the capacitor, which is what's going to the grids of there. So 0 volts on a power tube grid is a bad thing because it wants to see negative volts. So if I use too big a value here, we're going to have a problem with the power up. If it starts up too fast, and this has got a risk of starting up too fast because it's solid state rectifier, that's what we can't go too big, but I'm going to knock it up to 22 or 20. Let's have a bit of a quick recap of what we're up to. So I did check the ESR value of all of these old LCR capacitors, multi-can capacitors, 50 plus 50, and they're all measuring really healthy in the ESR values. So I've decided to leave them all in, check them all, they're all fine. These are 2 balancing resistors, totem resistors. These also surprisingly are extremely closely matched, which is what we need to make sure that the voltage is evenly balanced between the 2 capacitors. Over in the bias circuit, I've replaced those 2 capacitors. It now looks right, and we've just given them a little bit more capacitors for smoothing. I replaced the 2 coupling caps, terminated them properly, put in my preferred Mallory 150 capacitors. We tidied up this resistor. Remember it had that horrible double, I got a proper 0.68 there, proper 0.68 here. I did reduce this capacitor significantly. This is the normal channel cathode bypass, and I've taken it from 300 microfarad, 250 microfarad, sorry, down to 10 microfarad, which you might be thinking is a bit extreme, but I do want to make both channels of the Superbass usable, and pretty much done the conversion from Superbass to Superlead. And that mainly is here where we've split the cathode into 2 separate cathodes with the bright channel and the normal channel. Here, that's the bright cap for the bright channel. And I've also put in a smaller value of a bright cap here on the normal channel, once again to try and brighten it up and make it a little bit more usable. So it's got a choice of 2 channels. We'll have a listen to it. If I've made it too harsh or brittle, easy one to just pull out. That's about it. The only thing I need to do now is just clean the sockets, and I'll just show you how I do this. We'll just do one together. So I want to pop out that earthing leaf, so it's going to, on the hot, give that a couple of plugs in and out. I'm just using straight contact cleaner here. You can see, hopefully you can see that those contacts are moving. Let's have a look. There you go. That's just probably decades of grime there that have come out. So don't be bashful in giving your input sockets a bit of a clean. Now, important that we get a good earth on these, so the way I do that is I just put in a plug, and then especially this inner one, which is our hot lead, just give that a slight press to make sure that when that jack is out, we've got a good contact there, and we want that contact to be grounded. Yep, that's good. All right, I'll do the others. Before we apply any power to the amplifier, I just want to check the tubes themselves, the L34 tubes, and just make sure we're not going to have any rude surprises here. Now, according to our little ready reckoner, we're going to be looking between 21 and 50 in the plate current and a transconductance of over 4,000. So let's have a look and see what we got. So tube number 1, plate current 31.6. Number 2, 33.2. Number 3, 33.2. Wow, these looking excellent. Look at that. 30.9. Well, you can see what we're going to do. We're going to have these two as one opposing inner pair and these an opposing outer pair. Perfect. All right, now let's check our transconductance, which is sort of like a measure of gain, only we're not comparing voltage to voltage or current to current. We're comparing a change in the input voltage to give us a change in the output current, in the plate current. So it'll give us an indication of gain of sorts. So we're still on tube number 4, so that's going to be 5,450. Remember, we want to see over 4,000. 5,560. 5,560. Wow, these are still incredibly well matched. 5,290. Wow, okay. Excellent. Now I've hooked up the bias probes. I've got 2 Eurotubes bias probes. This one is on the weaker tube and this one is on the stronger tube. Got the full 240 volts coming in. Power on. And standby to play mode. All right, that's settling down a bit now, so I'm just going to check the hotter one. 467 volts times 0.019 milliamp is 8.73 watts. Divide that by 25, we know this is going to be very cool, and that's saying 35%. Very cool. I mean, very cold, I should say, not cool. All right, let's increase this voltage a little. There we go. So we're going to say 462 volts times 0.029 milliamp equals 13.4, divide that by 25, it's about 53%. I'm going to get this one up to about that voltage. Check this one, 460 times 0.032, 14.72 divided by 25, 59%. That's pretty close to perfect. Let's check this one, 456 times 0.037. Just want to make sure this one hasn't gone too hot. 67, nope, that's all right. I don't like to see it going over 70, but 67's okay. I might just knock it back a tad. I'm liking that. So when I think of that Marshall sound, I'm hearing it with mini humbuckers revved up in that amp, and I'm thinking Pete Townsend. And I got to say, I bought this album when I was 13. That's 50 years ago, more than. And it was a hugely influential album for me and the guy that's played bass with me since we were kids. So I think it's quite appropriate that I give that amp a rev up with my mini humbucker 1979 Les Paul and see what it sounds like. Ho-ho! I can't wait to hear this. It's going to be awesome. I'll tell you how I'm recording this. So I've got my orange 112 cab down here, and I've taken out the vintage 30, put in a EV12ML, one of my all-time favorite speakers, and it's the only speaker I've got that can handle this sort of power. It's being mic'd with a Shure Beta 57 going into my H4n recorder. Now I've just installed myself a dB meter, so this will be its first outing as well. So it's just going to be, I'm just curious to see how much my sound baffling is going to protect my hearing. All right, let's give it a run through the normal channel, same settings, same volume, and we'll just listen for that difference in tone. I won't do the whole thing, just the opening bit. Sounds awesome. Now I'm just going to take the soundproofing off so I can hear what you heard. And I'm curious to see what that volume meter is going to go up to. Oh, this is just crazy loud. You get thrown out of any club for playing at this level, I tell you. All right, I'm just going to do the chord. So it's still the normal channel, same settings. Jesus, 114 dB. This is just arresting volumes. Oh, geez, that sounds great. Oh, God. I hope this sounds as good out there as it does here. That'll do it for this week. That beautiful super bass to super lead conversion. It sounds sensational. And I'm going to see you at the next repair. Till then, take care and have a great 2023. No matter when you're watching this video, even in 2024. I hope you had a great 2023. Yeah. Okay. See ya.